So from venture capital and global platform building to elite sport, actually this is something that I'd like all of you to weigh in on. What common principles define high-performing people in your world? And we'll start with you there.
Always pushing yourself and your teams beyond the comfort zone and constantly learning. So constantly striving to learn from whatever you've done, improve, but also reflect on how you potentially can leapfrog. And that's what we're trying to do with our teams.
Okay. Cliff, you're a tech entrepreneur, a very dynamic space. How do you define that in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I'd very much agree. The biggest progress begins at the edge of a person's comfort zone. So constantly pushing yourself is definitely a key part. Also, when you can align your company's goals with the person's individual goals, 1 + 1 = 10 there, and you often get the best performance out of a person. And when we look to hire talent and bring people into the business, one thing we really look for is not where they're at, but the distance traveled. So if you can get a Stanford grad that grew up in Silicon Valley, had parents that worked at a tech company, I value that less than someone that grew up in an underprivileged area. They got themselves out of that area. They took themselves through high school, university, and may not have been the best university, but that distance traveled to me indicates a future direction of success more so than where they're at.
There you have somebody with proven tenacity, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to wonder. Tendai, you come from a world of sport where obviously high performance, it's do or die. You perform, you're there on the field, you're there on the pitch, you don't perform, you're not. How do you define that high performance, and how do we cultivate that?
I think for me, the most important thing that almost cuts across the board, for high performing individuals is that you have to have a clarity of purpose. You have to know your why. You have to know what you're trying to achieve and the reason why you wake up every morning. Put all those hours in the gym, all those hours on the field. Exactly what is the end goal? For myself, it was to win a World Cup, to be a world champion, to be the best. So that motivated me every single day. And then through that, having ownership. You got your wins. You got your column for wins and you got your column for losses. You got to take ownership for both and take the learnings on board and keep on growing, learning, a hunger to learn every single day, never being content, always pursuing different goals and, keep on moving that needle upwards. So I think those are some of the things that I see of great value, for high-performing individials.
You're talking about ownership, and you're singing my song there, because that's how I talk to my team at Khalij Time. It's just like, you got to own your work. And you got to have systems in place to own that work, and we can get into that in just a minute. Coop, you come from a purely creative background. Yeah, and so talk to me about, in that sort of pure space where you operate and have operated for a while.
Yeah.
How do you define high-performing people?
So for me, in cultivating high-performing people, it's creative. It's teaching them to tap into a spirit, because creativity comes from the spirit. And for me, I approach my creativity strictly from, I view it as my creativity comes straight from the hand of God. So for me, I'm able to, with having that responsibility as a creative, I'm teaching that to the other creatives so that they can tap into that spirit and creativity can flow freely. And as that creativity flows freely, they're able to pass that on to others.
Yeah.
And actually bring about change in people's lives and, for the best.
So it sounds almost like you're saying the initiation of your creativity is almost a solitary exercise, but then you're trying to share that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
That's very interesting.
Sharing that spirit so people pick that up and they create out of that,
yeah.
Which makes the creative process flow.
Yeah. So we're talking a lot about having systems in place that allow creativity. We're talking about people having ownership. And how do you make those learnings diffuse within a team, right, to incorporate that? And that goes nicely into our next question. This is the WGS. These are governments. They want to know, how do I get this stuff and build it into my universe? how can governments compete for talent in a world where startups, digital platforms move so fast and they are so dynamic? How does a government compete with that? And I'm going to go ahead and start at the end of our table here for that one, Cliff, because I want to hear your take since you come from that high-tech world.
Yeah, I mean, I think with any company or government, when you look at talent, you can get missionaries and you can get mercenaries. And I think government particularly has a great opportunity to find the best people that are mission-driven in life, because the levers you have working with government allow you to have maximum impact on the happiness of a population and even beyond the population and government you're working within. So I think you want to find those people that are trying to achieve big things and aren't necessarily just coin-driven or coin-operated. And when you can marry those things together, that's probably what I'd go with.
And Tendai, what can governments learn? How can they tap that intense energy and that high performance that comes from the world of, how does that get conveyed from your world to, how could a government learn from that?
No, I think there's a lot to learn from sport, and I think in South Africa, like the game I played, rugby is the #1 sport. And it basically unifies the country. If you know the history of South Africa, we come from segregation, from apartheid, and, it's still a very young country in terms of independence. So sport has had a pivotal role to play in terms of bringing people from all walks of life, So the government, harnesses that energy. We have been very blessed to be the #1 team in the world consistently for a very long time. So we've won World Cups, and every time, we've come back home with a trophy, you just see, white people, black people, all on the streets hugging each other. And, the government, the country has tried to tap into that and use that, as a tool of change, as a tool to inspire, to give hope to so many people. So there's a lot of learnings. And then you talk about talent, I think like in Africa, because I'm a Pan-Africanist, I believe in the whole of Africa, and I believe that we are a hub for talent and creativity. And what needs to happen for more governments is to invest in infrastructure, facilities for athletes to be able to go and better themselves, have continuous improvement and have big goals, so we need the government playing a pivotal role, and investing in coaches that coach the kids, mentorship. So I see governments playing a pivotal role in where we want to go.
In Africa, do you see there opportunity for potential upside for where governments could do a better job recruiting from that local talent?
Yes, certainly. I think there could be better systems put in place to discover talent, especially in the marginalized communities. So I have a foundation called the Beast Foundation, and our mandate is to go find those kids, in those marginalized or underserved communities where they're not necessarily given the opportunity to shine. So governments could have more initiatives to go in those areas and discover that talent and nurture it and invest. So it's something that I do obviously on a small scale with my foundation, but imagine if the government had to piggyback on that and it can just scale up and have more impact.
Yeah. And Eugene, you're heading an international organization, very international organization. And as a CEO, I know that you've got to be interfacing with not just one or two governments, but a lot of governments. Really interested in your perspective on what the governments generally can do to try to reach that talent pool, that talent pool that we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. I actually would like to flip your question a little bit.
Sure.
Because I was reflecting as you were asking the question. And of course, this is an amazing event, which got us a lot of world leaders and people from across the world. So we also took the opportunity this week to host about 30 of our largest bottlers from across the world here in Dubai. And we had them together for 2 days, Monday, Tuesday. So on Monday, and on purpose, I had His Excellency Hilal Al-Mari, who heads up the Department for Economy and Tourism here in Dubai, sit down with me to share with us the story and the vision of Dubai. And if I look at Dubai, Dubai really reminds me of probably one of the most successful business stories, even though you could say it's a government. But it starts with having a very bold vision, a vision that was created by His Highness, and a vision that obviously also was followed through investments, through ensuring that you have the right human capital in place to execute that vision. But it didn't stop there. It is also a vision that keeps evolving. And the first day we hosted that group in the Museum of the Future. And again, that reminded us and also that group of how important it is to always push the boundaries and think about how you can shape that future. And because none of us knows what the future really entails, and you can shape that future. And I believe that the government here in Dubai is doing an excellent job in terms of shaping that future, always pushing the envelope, always thinking ahead. And then obviously also thinking through what needs to be put in place from a legislative standpoint, a human capital standpoint, a governance standpoint, an investment standpoint to deliver on that vision. And that is pretty much what I think and the best companies also do. Now, then back to your question in terms of governments across the world. I think what is very important for any industry and also for our business is that governments take their role in terms of putting in place the right governance structures, legislation, etc., that enables businesses to prosper and to grow and to be part of the economic flywheel of a country, but also to help support the development of a country, whether it's in human capital, whether it's, in our case, also in agriculture. We have a huge agricultural footprint as PepsiCo across the world. But also what is very important is to create a level playing field across the industry so that there's predictability, that one understands, okay, what am I walking into, and that everyone within that industry is treated fairly, squarely, and equitably.
Yeah, and that I feel like that example that you discussed a moment ago, it's not just an example from one emirate to another emirate or emirates, it's also an example from this country, the UAE, to the whole region, and one that, to one degree or another, they all seem intent on emulating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kook, you know that creatives, they like flexibility. Mm-hmm. They like to be able to have a little latitude, a little agency where they can accomplish things, do things, try things. What your advice? You've got a government, a room full of government representatives here. What's your advice to them?
I feel like what we're missing is teaching people the value of having purpose. I feel like we're building so big, we're building so fast. People don't know what their true purpose is. They don't know why they're here, why they're here on this planet. And I feel like a focus of teaching people, really being committed to teaching, going back to the basics, leading people to find out why you're here. You know, a lot of us, we look great, we move around great, we drive great, but we're not sure what we're supposed to be doing. And I really feel like if government got to a place to where it really focused on, you know what, let's get back to the basics. Yes, let's build, let's look to the future, but let's not forget the basics of letting people understand, helping people understand why they're here on this planet. And as we do that, as we focus, it's just getting back to the basics. I want to be here to help you. I want to be here when I see you, or I see you and I ask, hey, how are you? I really mean, how are you? Not just a blanket, how are you, and keep it moving. Yeah. So I feel like if we have a commitment, if the government has a commitment to teaching people the basics, let's go back to the basics. Let's give people a real reason to be here.
Yeah, you know, they say there's no such thing as a self-perpetual motion machine, perpetual motion machine. But I find that when you have people on staff who actually really believe in what it is that you're trying to get them to accomplishment, they're perpetual motion machines. You don't ever have to prod them. They do it on their own, right?
They do it on their own, absolutely.
Yeah. Cliff, I got one for you. What role should technology platforms play specifically in democratizing skills and creativity and opportunity across, whole populations?
It's a very relevant question for us because we created our company, which is a company called Canva, to democratize design, something that used to be very professional and only able to be accessed by 1% of essentially university graduates, because you'd have to go to university to learn very complex design tools, and then you would have to pay these very expensive prices to get access to these tools. And so we saw a vision where we thought everyone should be able to express their creativity, and you shouldn't be constrained of taking an idea and turning it into a design, whatever that output may be, by the cost of the tools and by the complexity of the tools. So our whole business has been based on democratizing creativity and putting that in the hands of everyone. I think AI is obviously going to be a huge disruptor, but also a huge leveler as well, because right now you can pretty easily and cheaply access infinite information, and it's going to give the opportunity for those who maybe didn't go to the best universities or didn't get born with a silver spoon in their mouth to essentially educate themselves and learn professions and things that they never would have previously been able to do. So while it's going to be highly disruptive, it's also going to be a democratizing factor. And I think people now, it's no longer good enough to be T-shaped. When we hire people at Canva, we used to say we look for someone T-shaped. They've got good horizontal breadth and they're an expert in one industry or one profession, whether it's design, product management, business, finance, etc., etc. Now, to compete in today's modern world, you need to be E-shaped. You need that horizontal breadth, but you need to be good at basic business and finance. And like, you can teach yourself that. I used to be a school teacher, for example. I've taught myself that stuff. You need to understand how you build products, and that product could be a digital product, or it could be a program you're creating for a country. And then you need to learn other things like design and engineering. You need to understand the basics of engineering, of how a building's built or how technology comes to fruition. And that stuff doesn't mean you have to code, but you should understand the basic building blocks. Just like when you create a building, you know it needs to be built on good foundations. You need to understand what ladders up to make what you do a success.
I'm going to just go off script for just a second here, because you said something that's really interesting to me. It's like AI tools, it's sort of like democratizing, right? We've talked about digital technology democratizing things for about 25 years now, and it's happened, right? It has happened. It also, the flip side of that though, is it's taking that sort of credentialed worker and making everybody be just as good as him or her, pretty much, right? Like, I'm curious, let me ask you, do you have a thought on that one? Like, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that? I mean, certainly I see upsides from a business standpoint, but how do you navigate that sort of, it's almost a changing of the guard from this group to the whole group?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look at the possibilities of AI, and I think we're only starting to understand, okay, what are really the possibilities of AI. So we're obviously one of the companies that is adopting AI at scale across our value chain, from farming all the way to how we engage with our consumers. Now, let me give you an example in farming. Yeah? So in farming, AI really is a big enabler for farmers that we interact with, and we interact with about 100,000 farmers across the world, to improve their operations, improve their yields, reduce their environmental footprint, and do that both with large-scale farmers as well as small-scale farmers. So we work with, let's say, massive large-scale farmers. So for instance, in South Africa, we have a mix of large-scale farmers and emerging farmers that we work with. But in the case of India, we work with 27,000 small-scale farmers. Yeah. Now, with them, through technology that you can have on your cell phone, we're able to help them, improve their yields through better farming practices, reduce the amount of water that they're using, reduce the amount of fertilizer that they're using, and we're also able to do that at a relatively low cost, in a low cost way. So this is just one example where AI becomes an enabler to create a much better output, because especially in this example of the small-scale farmers, the income increase that they get because their yield goes up actually goes back to the community and actually makes that community a more thriving community. Now, then maybe just to finish it off in terms of what is the impact, let's say, on the type of roles. Roles will evolve, yeah? And roles have evolved for centuries, for millenniums. I was in Egypt last week with my leadership team, and we visited the pyramid of Gizeh. So 4,500 years this was created. It took 20 years to create it. 20,000 to 30,000 people were at it. And it was the largest or the highest structure for almost 4,000 years.
That's correct.
Now, of course, since then, we've evolved, and of course, I mean, lots of different things again were created. And I see that also happening now with AI, that roles will evolve. Of course, we will need to learn new skills, but we constantly need to, well, learn new things. And as a company, we're also committed to this reskilling, retraining of our workforce.
Yeah. Got one for you, Tendai. You look at the lessons that you've learned through your world in elite athletic performance. You know, there's discipline, there's resilience, there's teamwork, there's leadership under pressure. These all sound to me like assets to a public institution. Which of those do you see, you know, serving a public institution or public institutions in the best ways?
Geez, I think there's a whole host of them. Like you mentioned, quite a few there. But I think, you know, there's a lot to be learned from sport. You know, especially in the sport that I played, rugby. You know, teamwork is everything. You know, and within that team, you got different individuals that bring different skill sets to the table. So you got guys that can run the quickest, you got guys that are strong, you know, that can do the damage up front, and you got guys that can kick the ball. So yeah, I was one of the guys that used to destroy guys up front. So, you know, you got different elements in a team, and all those team members understand their roles, and for the team to achieve optimum performance or the goals, you have to perform together. You know, you have to lay aside your own egos, your own selfish ambitions, you know, so you can learn a lot of that, you know, and through that comes the leadership, you know, that everybody doesn't have to have a captain's armband for them to be a leader. You know, you can be a leader in your own right. You can literally take charge of what that is in front of you, your job at hand, and do that exceptionally well. And in that, you become a leader yourself. You know, you become an enabler. So, you know, there's so many lessons. Discipline, you know, routine is key. When you get used to something, waking up every day, doing it over and over again, you're only going to get better at it, and you're only going to become the best at it. So, you know, repetition is key. It might seem monotonous, but it actually does add so much value. Like, you know, Kaizen, I love that word, the Japanese word Kaizen, continuous improvement. You know, every single day is another moment for you to get better. So I think governments, you know, NGOs, private, public sector can learn so much from that. And yeah, in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah, I like that term too, by the way. We only have just about a minute left, so I ask, we'll just make this one quick. Coop, I'm gonna ask you to get a little bit outside of your comfort zone here. So how should governments redesign education and their workforce systems in order to continuously develop that creative capital, that human capital?
You're bringing me all the way out of my comfort zone. Ask me that one more time. One more time.
So what, if governments wanted to entice that talent, that creativity, that resilience, what are ways that they could change what they do to recruit
talent
more effectively? Yeah.
It's that's kind of a hard one, because creativity and talent, we're kind of against like a system.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard for government to be able to recruit talent, because we would automatically see that as, wait a second, what are you trying to do to my creativity? Because we're trying to work outside of the box of the labels and the publishing companies and all that. Yeah. So it'd be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
A little bit difficult without figuring out, going back to what I was saying earlier, just allowing that person to just be free with it.
It's signaling some sort of openness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If it's structured right away, it's hard.
Yeah. I think on that one, we find this as well, because true creatives, you can't put them in a structure. They hate structure. Exactly. So you need someone that can coalesce the structure and understand how the structure works, but also understand creative people, because you need to let creatives be creatives, and you need that bridge into the structure so they can do their crazy thing, the beautiful thing that they do, and feed those ideas and that creativity up into the structure in a way that they can actually absorb it.
Well said.
There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you